So, namaste, good evening, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Bhagavad Gita classes. Uh, and today we will um, continue our discussion of the vision of the universal form. We will recollect a couple of points from our previous discussion, which is as follows. So we discussed about Arjuna's desire for the divine vision and the purpose of the divine vision, and then we touched upon the after effects of the divine vision. We also saw how the cosmic form is having 49 levels. Now, this you can see from different perspective, holistically also, or just globe D also. So the formula applies here about the one and the whole and the one representing each other. Then we touched upon the idea of what is a cosmos with a K and a cosmos with a C. So there is a difference between these two, and HPB uses these terms quite frequently. So understanding these terms is important. And why do we call it yoga of the divine form? Because um, that is important. Once we understand this, then we can perform the yoga, because Bhagavad Gita is a book of devotion, book of yoga, book of dhyana and meditation. So, what is the technique or the method or the purpose of this chapter is what we are currently trying to understand and how to practice this yoga. So, we'll continue on these thoughts. Now, even before uh, practicing or getting much in-depth understanding about the same, um, we need to understand that the absolute truth cannot be mentioned in words or in diagrams, because the moment you express it either in words or in diagrams, you will lose the essence of it, because the absolute truth is of not this plane, of not this level of consciousness, and words cannot capture it in totality. Images, diagrams cannot capture it in totality. So we need to be careful as not to accept the um, diagrams which we use to discuss as the complete truth, since if we do that, it may lead to further delusion. So therefore, if you see, even HPB has provided very few diagrams. The most famous or commonly used is page 200 diagram in the Secret Doctrine. However, in order to communicate with each other, discuss like what we are doing now, we need these tools. We need to have these diagrams as a starting point in our thought process for our contemplation. Once we get the idea, we can then discard these and move on the next higher level of conceptualization until we reach the truth. And this yoga needs to be performed by each one of us as their own independent study. And in this context, I would just like to quickly bring to your attention what HPB has mentioned is very important. She has said that as one progresses in Jnana Yoga, one finds conceptions arising which, though one is conscious of them, one cannot express nor yet formulate into any sort of mental picture. As time goes on, these conceptions will form into mental pictures. This is a time to be on guard and refuse to be deluded with the idea that the new found and wonderful picture must represent reality. It does not. As one works on, one finds the once admired picture growing dull and unsatisfying and finally fading out or being thrown away. This is another danger point, because for the moment one is left in a void without any conception to support one, and one may be tempted to revive the cast of picture for want of a better to cling to. The true student will, however, work on unconcerned and presently further forms gleams once, which again in time give rise to a larger and more beautiful picture than the last. But the learner will now know that no picture will ever represent the truth. This last splendid picture will grow dull, fade like the others. And so the process goes on until at last the mind and its pictures are transcended and the learner enters and dwells in the world of no form, but of which all forms are narrowed reflections. So this applies not only to the learning of Bhagavad Gita, it can apply to Secret Doctrine and all the other scriptures. But the idea is that this is how the Jnana Yoga needs to be performed. And Lord Krishna says that Jnana Yoga is the ultimate which finally leads to realization, the ultimate realization. So all these yogas which are mentioned in Bhagavad Gita work in parallel. Uh, we can start with any yoga, but ultimately we need to reach to Jnana Yoga. And once we are practicing Jnana Yoga, we have to keep these points in mind because these are very practical, important, powerful guidance which will help us on our journey. So, with this, we will just touch upon the other point that while we are practicing Jnana Yoga, while we are putting in effort, because see, the formless, the attributeless, the beingness cannot be conceptualized by us. Remember, in one of the previous discussions, we discussed that Lord Krishna says that there are various kinds of devotees. In fact, there are four kinds of devotees, but the most um beloved to Lord Krishna is the one who works on the path of Jnana Yoga and even works towards the formless, attributeless aspect of Jnana Yoga. But to start with, it's difficult. So, in this journey, people are at different grades, different levels based on their previous lives and efforts. So some people start with the form way of devotion. So they conceptualize a form and then have the devotion towards that form, and then ultimately they reach the formless. But even in order to work toward the formless, we need to have some idea of the formless, and that is what we are doing in this discussion. And what happens when we put in such effort? And we saw this in our last meeting that with every such effort of will towards purification and unity with that, one of the lower ray breaks, and the spiritual entity of man is drawn higher and ever higher to the ray. That supersedes the first until from ray to ray, the inner man is drawn into the one and the highest being of the parent sun. So, in continuation to our discussion of the divine form, we need to slightly step back and see from the beginning, like what's happening. Because once we get the holistic picture, or at least some important aspects of the holistic picture of the divine form, then only we can meditate on the divine form with the right inputs. So the more information we have, the more data we have, the more points to think or contemplate we have, the more better our meditation will be on the divine form. So we start and we try to understand how the divine form is connected with our world and what happened in the beginning and where we are and how's it all connected. So another couple of points which we need to keep in mind is that the one self animates all forms of every kind. So, and it has got the sustaining power. It is the substratum, it is the basis, and as well as the perceiving power is there in each and every form. So, the divine form is not only the source, it is also the container. It is not only the container, it is also the superset or the basis of all the forms. And not only that, it is a sustaining power, it is a substratum. Not only that, it is the perceiving power also. So, in fact, all the forms which we see in the vast universe is actually the expression of that one self, that one pure consciousness only. And this is what we need to understand. So, when we meditate on the divine form, the one important thing which we also need to keep at the back of the mind is that this many which we see, so many people in our world, and so many worlds, and so many galaxies, and so many Milky Ways, and so many black holes, and so on and so forth, everything is nothing but the expression of that one pure consciousness. And we are that. That is the ultimate level of realization. The divine form is the substratum of all forms, and there is no form outside the divine form. So, even if there is a very creative person, an engineer, a scientist, or an artist, they create a new form, let's say a 4D or a 5D form, or some new mathematical form, or a new art, or something which nobody has done ever before. There is nothing like that. Everything under the sun, and when we say sun, it's a central spiritual sun, because we are considering the whole cosmos, the cosmos with a K, like we saw in our last meeting, the absolute abstract container. There is no container behind or after that container. It is the mother of all containers. In the mother of all containers, there is nothing new. Whatever form is there is already pre-programmed. It's there. When we, as scientists, engineers, or artists, or whoever, a creative person, create a new form, and we think we have created, we only tap into the universal mind, Mahat or Mahabuddhi, and we are able to tune our vibration to that and pull that form out and express it as an architect or as a creative person. That's about it. So there is no form which is beyond that substratum. And we need to understand from the beginning what's happening. So HBB says in the first page itself of Secret Doctrine that first the student knows to represent cosmos in eternity before the reawakening of the still slumbering energy, the animation of the word in the later system. And this word we saw and will still touch upon is again referred to that soundless sound, the original vibration, the impulse which is coming. It's also mentioned as in the Vedas as the Nada Brahma or the Shabda Brahma. And then she says the point in the heather to immaculate disk, space, and eternity in Pralaya. So the point in the immaculate disk. So here we see this black surface as the immaculate disk. So this disk can be extending in all directions. You can think of it as a sphere which is going in all directions in infinity. Just we cannot represent that, so we are capturing it as a small circle here. And the point in the hither to immaculate disk space, eternity in Pralaya, denotes the dawn of differentiation. It is the point in the mundane egg. So the mundane egg, HPB in transaction says several times, it's the undifferentiated matter. So egg on any plane, or the mundane egg on any plane, is the subtlest, the most refined, the initial starting point of Prakriti. It is the undifferentiated matter. So there is a point in that. And if you can see, I don't know if you can see it properly or not, there is a small gray point which has appeared here. It's actually a dark point. It is a potential white point. So in this immaculate disk, the space, the container, where this dark surface is represented, is the dark flame. And we have this potential point, which is a potential white point. And if you clearly try to see, it's a slightly gray color in the center. And then, based on the cycles and the impulse, there is this abstract triangle which is formed. And this later we'll see becomes the apex of our page 200 diagram. And this abstract triangle is formed. And then we have the point in the mundane egg. And then she says that the germ, so this becomes the germ, and within the letter will become the universe. So this germs will become the universe. Not going too much into the technicalities because this is not a secret doctrine class, but we need to still understand the core ideas. And then what she says is this germ being latent and active periodically by turns. The one circle is divine unity, from which all proceeds, whether all returns. Its circumference, a forcible limited symbol in the view of the limitation of the human mind, indicates the abstract, ever incognizable presence. So that's where we need to, during the yoga of the divine form, that's where we need to take our mind. So HPP has very cleverly and very precisely, in a very calculated manner, given this paragraph. Even if we meditate on this paragraph, it will take our mind towards the divine form. And then we see that um, only the face of the disk being white and the ground all black shows clearly that its plane is the only knowledge, and the dim hazy, though it still is, that is attainable by man. So even though it is hazy, it's dim, we don't know, it's attributeless, it's beingness, it's formless, immaculate, unthinkable, unspeakable, still attainable by man to a great extent. And it is on this plane that the Manmantric manifestation begins. So then, when the activity starts, the as seen in the proem, we have the white disk, and then in that arises the black dot, which then we have the diameter, and the first central point in white, thus symbolizing coeval and co-eternal spirit and matter, making its appearance in the phenomenal world before its first differentiation. So the original Prakriti is actually represented as spirit matter, the purest form, and that starts differentiation. So what we see is a disk with a point. The first differentiation is the periodical manifestation of the ever eternal nature, and the point in the disk, or the potential space within the abstract space, is mentioned, and then that is transformed into the diameter, and then we can say that's from there starts the whole of our page 200 diagram. And very important thing, we need to remember that in this immaculate disk, which is the abstract absolute container, and where we have this dark surface of the dark flame, the unknowable, unthinkable, there are multiple systems coming and going like this. And this system could be a galaxy, could be a Milky Way, could be a solar system, could be just a planet, and so on and so forth. So the same formula is being applied, and they're infinite. I mean, we cannot even think about it. And this is just, we are speculating, we are using the logic which is given, the formula which is given in the Secret Doctrine and elsewhere to understand. HPB says even the highest of the dhyanis in our world cannot go beyond our world or our solar system or our page 200 diagram, if you may call it. So where are we? But these points which HPB has given are seed thoughts which help us contemplate on the divine form. And we talked about the Nada Brahma or Shabda Brahma, and last time we saw that how our system is actually can be mapped to different forms of work. And I'll not go into this detail because we have already done, but let's keep this idea at the back of our mind as per our today's discussion. And then we discussed about the states of consciousness, how we are mapping each state, and how the Kabbalists do with respect to the interpenetrating, abstract, reflected, and objective light. And then we touched upon the idea that there are Laya points everywhere, sub-Laya points, and major Laya points. So this leads us to a very important thing, that there is a mapping between the microcosm and the macrocosm. And everything in this divine form, not only the divine form, but whatever exists in the divine form, all forms are actually very divine. So we, as the microcosm, being a copy of the macrocosm, is also very divine. So each human being, irrespective of their race, from where they're coming, their background, their actions, their thoughts, everybody is divine. Each human being is like a temple, and the sanctum sanctorum is the heart. And we the more we clean the temple and lead a good life, the more the light in the heart would shine. And then, in this context, what Zohar also says from the Kabbalistic perspective, and it's very important, it talks about the divine reciprocity, wherein all that which is found upon the earth has its spiritual counterpart on high. And there does not exist the smallest thing in the world which is not itself attached to something on high and is not found in dependence on it. All that which is contained in the lower world is also found in the upper. The lower and the upper reciprocally act upon each other. Spiritual man is both the import and the highest degree of creation. As soon as man was created, everything was complete, including the upper and the lower worlds. For everything is comprised in man. He unites in himself all the forms. So, this is another seed thought which we need to use in our meditations of the divine form, because what we understand from this is extremely important. All the worlds or the planes or levels of consciousness, however you see, are all connected with each other, and each one reflects each other. Each one is having an influence or an impact on each other. So whatever happens on our world also impacts the other worlds and other beings, and vice versa. So we understand that the same concept which we discussed about the Indra's net in our previous discussion. So this intricate net of the whole cosmos is connected with these fine threads, or uh, however you see it. A slightest vibration touches all the vertices or the connecting nodes. So at each vertex, you have a system, and one slight touch, or even a sound, or even some kind of vibration would have a ripple effect on all the globes, all the systems, all the galaxies, all the worlds. Which means that each thought of ours during the whole day and our life has so much impact on the whole cosmos, with a C and with a K also, which we do not realize. And the final thing here we need to understand is that he unites in himself all the forms. So all the forms which Lord Krishna showed to Arjuna in the divine vision are not only out there in the divine form, or the container, absolute abstract container, it is also in us, because we are a copy of that. So in order to reach that vision, we don't need to go out somewhere. In our meditations, in ourselves itself, we can identify, reach, realize, understand the entire divine form of the whole cosmos. So if man understands himself, they can understand the whole universe. That's why the abstract formula, man know thyself. And then we see that the whole of the cosmos, it says, it necessarily exists in the one source of energy from which this light forth emanates, which means that hence each one of us also exists in that one source of energy, which further implies that we all are connected on all planes. So this is another correlation. So it becomes very important to keep all these ideas at the back of mind when we are trying to meditate on the divine form. We also realize that each system, each world is reflecting the other, kind of a fractal image. Each human being is a representation of the whole. All the forms are in us, and we are all connected. So, in fact, going back to our previous idea, there is only one consciousness, one pure divine consciousness, which is animating, which is the sustainer, which is the guide in all of us, in all forms, whether it's human forms or any organic or inorganic, because consciousness is everywhere. So, when we think of these things, all our bias, negative emotions, and everything dissipates, it falls apart, because we realize that each one of us is actually that one divine pure consciousness, and it's not me and you, it's the one pure consciousness. These are all the expressions. But in order to still understand what's going on, we need to take a further step back and understand that in the beginning, which we saw, that a new system was created. There was this point in the immaculate disk and the uh, primary white point, and then differentiation happened, and so on and so forth. But from where is this impulse coming? We understand that there is something known as the divine eros, or the divine desire. So that arose in that, the unspeakable and the unthinkable. And the one ray started, and then from there, everything started. But we can also try to understand that this uh, unknown cause, as mentioned, and also known as in Sanskrit, the karana. Karana means the cause, the unknown cause here, is actually should be coming from some source. And what is that source? Because this mechanism or this method of questioning or contemplating helps us to reach higher and higher levels. So we may ask this question: from where did that one ray come from? And the couple of slides we'll see now, we have also used in one of our other presentation, the music of spheres. But these are one or two slides which I thought will be helpful for the group. So I have captured it here. So what Secret Doctrine mentions is that we have our solar system and our sun, which is the visible sun. But this behind this sun is actually the real sun. What we are seeing is just a reflection. And sun, you can think of it as Laya center also for a particular system. And let's call our sun as the S1 sun. And then this sun actually revolves around yet another center. And that center, we label it as S2. And so here we are also showing the coordinates. So you have one, the equatorial plane, and on which the S2 is going, and our S1 is going around that. And then you have the polar coordinates shown here, and S2 is actually going around another sun or another center. And science has not yet arrived at this conclusion, but HPB has given this hint in Secret Doctrine. And then we see that S3 actually goes around another center, which is part of the Pleiades group, and that star is known as Alcyon. This is the brightest star in that constellation. And Alcyon, the center, again goes around the central spiritual sun, the unknown center of all. So, what in effect is happening is that there is this impulse which is coming from that unknown center. But for all our, from the perspective or the context of our system S1, Alcyon itself is the central spiritual sun. But that itself is going around something which we have no idea about. So the impulse actually comes from the central spiritual sun, goes into the Alcyon, the equivalent of central spiritual sun for our system. There at each level, that impulse which is coming, or the one ray which is coming, is tweaked, is modified, is calibrated for the next system. So think of Nada Brahma, Shabda Brahma, Vak, Shakina, all these ideas while we are discussing this. And this impulse then reaches S3, the heart of S3, the sun of the S3 system, again gets tweaked, calibrated, and then reaches S2, tweaked, calibrated, and reaches our system S1. So let's assume that there was nothing there. Our system, page 200 diagram for us did not exist. Our world did not exist. Then when the impulse would have come from S2, it would have triggered the Prakriti, and from there all the differentiation started. So the initial immaculate disk which we saw would have gotten activated when the impulse from S2 came, and it's continuously coming. There is no stoppage, because if you see Shabda Brahma and Nada Brahma, and we saw the four aspects of Vak, the Para, Pashanti, Madhyama, and Vaikari. So the sound or the vibration or the impulse is continuously coming. It is sustaining our system and it is sustaining other system. The moment that vibration would stop, the whole system would collapse. So it is continuously coming. And it once it starts stopping, it's the in-breath. That's where everything goes back. And then again, this slide gives a quick idea that this impulse is like a solar cycle which comes every 11 years, or 11 human years, which is equivalent to a solar cycle. Some places it's mentioned 11 and a half, some places mentioned 12, because this impulse is not coming just on the physical. First, it comes on the higher planes, then it reaches the astral, and then it physical. When science captures this impulse, they say 11 human years. But behind that, there is impulse which has already started in the higher planes, which the science is not able to capture. So we need to understand then that Parabrahman is, in short, the collective aggregate of cosmos in its infinity and eternity. So when we say Ein Sof Parabrahman, Ein Sof in Kabbalah, or we say the unthinkable, the unspeakable, we also know that the absolute abstract container has an aspect of it. And HPB has mentioned in Secret Doctrine that aspect is the Parabrahma, which in short, she also says the collective aggregate of cosmos. So everything, the whole millions of galaxies, the systems, the bigger cosmos, which we saw last time, is equivalent to Parabrahma. But we also saw that everything is a practical image. It's sevenfold, and there is a coordination happening. So occult philosophy, viewing the manifested and the unmanifested cosmos as a unity, symbolizes the ideal conception of the former by the golden egg with two poles in it. This is very important, and people generally overlook this idea. So, again, occult philosophy viewing the manifested and unmanifested. So, the cosmos has two sides to it, like the two sides of the same coin. There is the manifested aspect and there is the unmanifested aspect. Mostly we keep on talking about the manifested aspect, but both manifested and unmanifested together as a unity is what HPB is guiding us to contemplate on, because that symbolizes the whole, and it has got two poles. It is a positive pole that acts in the manifested world of matter, that is Prakriti, while the negative is lost in the unknowable absoluteness of Sat, the beingness. So the negative, the unmanifested, is the unthinkable, the unspeakable, the immaculate, the everlasting, and from there comes the positive pole, the manifested. Now let's quickly try to understand this in another 5 minutes, and then we'll have a break. So we have this mathematical line in that absolute abstract container somewhere. In that arises this point of activity, which we saw in the previous slide, that immaculate disk with a black background, and then finally we have the white circle, and then we have the black point in the diameter. But that white circle, when it comes, that white circle is actually emanating, or the white circle itself is the next stage of the absolute abstract triangle, and that itself is this yellow point what we are seeing, and this is known as the Prabhavapyaya. But on the upper side we have the unmanifested side. We have no idea about it, what happens there. And when the in-breath happens, everything is there for 7 eternities. We have no idea what's happening there. But when the out breath happens, this other side, we have the Prakriti, which is eternal. So even when Mahamanvantara happens, the Prakriti is always there. And then when the out breath is happening, from the Prabhava the place, or rather the plane, whence emerges the origination into which the resolution of all things happen at the end of the pralaya. So this yellow point is that white point which we discussed. From here comes the influence. That influence which we discussed is coming from the central spiritual sun, and it's kind of a out breath. And this out breath is coming from this main laya center, and then this what comes out of this main laya center is also known as the conscious spiritual quality, the highest conceivable spiritual form, the highest primordial matter. So in the notes to Bhagavad Gita, William Conn Judge uses these terms, and HPB also mentions that this is what is the divine form. I mean, in order to reach here, we need to contemplate on this spiritual conscious quality, and then we can think of everything which happens in this conscious spiritual quantity. So then comes at a later stage our system, and we can think of this as the Hiranyagarbha, where the system starts. And on the right, if you see, there is a quote from SD 1289. It says the initial existence in the first twilight of the Mahamanvantara is a conscious spiritual quality. In the manifested worlds or solar systems, it is in objective subjectivity, like the film from a divine breath to the gaze of the enhanced seer. It spreads as it issues from Laya throughout infinity as a colorless spiritual fluid. It is on the seventh plane in its seventh state. So, how do we know all this? Because it is mentioned and in the ancient source also that the great seers of the past and who still exist, they meditated, they went into the highest level of meditation, and they touched the kernel of matter, and they collaborated each other's learning. So, the divine form and the idea of divine form is known and captured, and all these ideas are captured by these great seers who have reached that highest level of meditation and arrived at these ideas, and they have seen directly, they have realized directly the divine form. So HPV also says, and this is very important from the perspective of chapter 11 also, that everything in this side of the out breath is actually known as Mahamaya. And HPB uses this term in Secret Doctrine, and everything is temporary. And then finally, we have our system which arises, and then the apex is in the yellow point here. And we have the whole life of Brahma, uh, Mahat, or the universal mind, which from where the projection happens, if we may think in that perspective. And after 100 years of Brahma, the life is over, everything is destroyed, everything gets back into the Laya point. And the Laya point also further merges back into the unknown. And then we have something which happens on the other side for 7 eternities. We have no idea about that. So the previous slide which we are touching upon, she says the unmanifested and the manifested as a whole. So when we are saying of the, when we are talking of the divine form, we should not just talk about the manifested part, the page 200 diagram only, because that's half part of it. The other part is the unmanifested side where the in-breath happens. So this whole, she says, the other side, the other pole is labeled negative, the manifested side is labeled positive, and then in that this whole system keeps coming and going periodically. So what we see is again and again this system of ours after Mahamanvantara starts, and again there is activity, and again a new Manvantara or a new day of Brahma happens, and then Pralaya happens, and then it disappears. There is a pause, a gap, a period of rest. Then again, next mantra comes until the 100 years of Brahma, and this also disappears, and then finally everything merges back into that unknown side of it. So I will pause here, and the last thing to note is our cosmos and nature will run down only to reappear on a more perfect plane after every pralaya. Nature is ever becoming on the manifested plane, which we saw. So I think this is a good time to pause and hand it over to Jerry.